Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Dan Hiscock, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Sergeant Lance Purdon. The first Wednesday of September each year marks Battle for Australia Day. After Japan entered the war in December 1941, a generation of Australians left their homes to work or serve in the defence of their nation. Late 1941 and early 1942 was a dramatic time for Australia as Japanese forces moved swiftly southward through the Pacific. On the 15th of February 1942, Singapore fell to the Japanese and prompted Australia's Prime Minister, John Curtin, to declare that the battle for Australia had begun. Thousands of Australians were engaged in actions against Japanese forces, including those who served to defend the Australian mainland against attacks. Battle for Australia Day is a day for us to recognise those who served in the defence of the Australian mainland and in land, air and sea battles in the Coral Sea, Papua and New Guinea. These actions stopped the Japanese southward advance. Some 22,000 Australians became prisoners of the Japanese during the war, of whom some 8,000 lost their lives. This evening we remember all those who died during the battle for Australia and whose names are recorded here on the Roll of Honour, and the survivors who returned home. We are honoured to acknowledge Mr Sean Tupper, Deputy Minister for Public Safety, Canada. Ms Elaine Ning, Deputy Secretary, Administration of the Ministry of Defence and Chair, Defence Collective Singapore, and the accompanying delegations. We also warmly welcome representatives of the Battle for Australia Commemoration National Council. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Service Clubs Association, and we welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of Mallacoota College from Mallacoota, Victoria, and Columba Catholic College from Charters Towers in Queensland. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. Now, if you're able, I invite you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Students can be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bourne, Australia's First World War official historian. Bourne landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bourne's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bourne's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Maxwell Bourne Daniels. Maxwell Daniels was born in Malang, South Australia, on the 8th of January 1915, the son of Christina and William Daniels. He grew up in Malang, a town on the west coast of Lake Alexandrina, about 70 kilometres southeast of Adelaide. After his schooling, he found work as a lorry driver. Maxwell Daniels enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 26th of February 1941. After a short period of training, he took pre-embarkation leave in March. On the 10th of April, Private Daniels embarked for active overseas service. He arrived in the Middle East in mid-May, and in June he joined the 2nd 27th Infantry Battalion, which had just begun its first offensive operation, the invasion of Syria and Lebanon. The battalion was employed in the drive north along the Lebanon coast, and most of its operations were outflanking moves in the hills that edged the coastal plain. After major actions at Adlun, Miomai, and around El Bom, as part of the Battle of Damour, Vichy, French forces surrendered in mid-July. Daniels and his comrades remained in Lebanon as part of the Allied garrison until January 1942, when they travelled to Egypt and began the return journey to Australia. After disembarking in Adelaide on the 24th of March, Daniels had a period of home leave. But by mid-August, the 2nd 27th Battalion had arrived at Port Moresby in Papua, and by the 6th of September, it was in position at Mission Ridge on the Kokoda Trail, preparing to meet the relentless advance of the Japanese. The battalion held on to its positions for 2 days before being forced to pull out by a Japanese outflanking move that cut the trail behind it. There followed a grim 2-week withdrawal through the jungle with little food. Sick and exhausted, the men of the 2nd 27th rejoined the main Australian force at Jawarir, 40 kilometres east of Port Moresby, on the 22nd of September. After a period of rest and retraining, Daniels and his comrades in the 2nd 27th returned to action at Gona in the north coast of Papua in late November. There they suffered heavily in a series of rushed and ill-conceived attacks. They were further assailed by the ravages of tropical disease. By the time the battalion was relieved in January 1943, it was only 70 strong. At Gona, troops along the whole front had charged forward with fixed bayonets under fierce enemy fire. Parts of the battalion moved into and through the village with enemy snipers active and apparently firing at the wounded and stretcher parties. The area was too small for effective support artillery fire, so the Australians undertook mortar bombardment before attacking a strong enemy post. The objective was taken briefly before an enemy counterattack forced a withdrawal with many casualties. By the afternoon, 75 yards of ground had been taken. Killed in action at Gona on the 1st of December 1942, Maxwell Daniels was 27-year-old. Initially buried in Jonah War Cemetery, his remains were later reinterred in Port Moresby's Bamana War Cemetery, where they lie today under the inscription chosen by his grieving family: "His duty nobly done, forever remembered." His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Maxwell Bourne Daniels, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We'll leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. Wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.